Are you not gonna do it again? Come on. Come here. Oh. Hey guys, I know it's been a while. It's been rough. Lots been going on in life between school, or almost graduating, love interest, breaking up with my boyfriend, getting a new boyfriend, all that crazy stuff. So yeah, we're in the second month of 2020 and I've decided it's time to get back to it. So I'm gonna talk about the books that I read for January. And so in January, I read 12 books, which is a good bit. Oh yeah, my goal for reading, I last year set the goal at 100, only got to 86. This year, I'm setting the goal at 100 again because I think this is the year that I can do it. But I don't want to focus on quantity. I don't want to just rush through these books. Like, I want to make sure I'm absorbing them and getting them stories in my head, at least the good ones. All right, so let's get to the talking about them books. Okay, so the first book that I read for 2020 was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste. All right, so I read Little Fires Everywhere, and I liked the story. Okay, yeah, I liked the story pretty well. I either gave it 4 out of 5 stars, something like that. But Everything I Never Told You, I absolutely loved. This was a 5 out of 5 read for me. I really, really enjoyed it. So the premise of the book is that this family, the Lee family, have 3 kids. So Lydia, Nathan, and Hannah. And Lydia dies. They don't really know how or what happened. They just know that her body was found in this lake. Death of one of the members really causes tension in the family, and just we're watching them go through that grief and trying to find out what happened. I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was really, really good. I thought the concept was really good, and just seeing that, because there was this element of we want to know like what happened to Lydia, like how did she die, and it was building up to that, but it was more focused on the family and what they're going through and their ways of coping and how much this has impacted their lives. So Everything I Never Told You, I'd probably recommend it over Little Fires Everywhere. Little Fires Everywhere was good, but this one, just the exploration of grief and the watching the family bonds disintegrate is just chef's kiss. It was my first it was the first book of the year and the first 5 out of 5 of the year. So hell yeah. Okay, so the second book I read was actually a gift from my boyfriend for Christmas. That book is Ready Player One. So this book, as I read through the book, I kept giving him my commentary. I'm giving him commentary as I'm reading, and I'm just like very obviously disliking the book. I can tell you straight off the bat, I gave this book a 2 out of 2. All right, and I know this is controversial because a bunch of people love this book and all this stuff. It's so hyped, but I did not like this, and let me tell you why. So first of all, it was very obvious who he was trying to write, what's the author's name? Ernest Cline was trying to write towards. It very much felt like he was writing to teenage boys, which, hey, if that's the demographic you want to write for, go ahead. Go ahead, go off, sis. Like, that's what you want to do. That's your targeted audience. Like, do it. But what irritated me is that the way the characters would speak was very much like an older person, man, so cute, was very much like an older person trying to write how kids talk, and it just missed the mark. But also, I had a problem with the writing, not just the dialogue, but the actual writing, and this was something I kind of struggled with mentally, because on one hand, I felt like there was so much description, like just boom, info dump in your face. And I felt like there was a lot of that. Like I would sit there and read like 5 pages on how this game operated, which in a later book, I will talk about the exact opposite of this problem. But back to Ready Player One. So I felt like it was very info heavy, and I appreciate knowing what's going on, but I just felt like it was just too much. Like when you're reading page after page of description about the what do they call it, the hardware of this game, like I don't care. But at the same time, I do understand there was a world to build and like a lot of description that like it wasn't just like, oh, my characters are in like the Arctic, so I'm gonna, or like in this fantasy world, so I'm gonna make them go about their day and that's how I'm going to describe the fantasy world. Like I understand that it was a type of setting that where there's basically 2 settings at once, you know, in the Oasis and in the real world, and that took a lot to set up. And I have to say, I am thankful that I have never had to, because if I had to set this up, I don't know what I would have done besides the info dump. So on one hand, I'm like, it was so info dump heavy, but on the other, I'm like, I don't know how else he could have let us know as much as we needed to know about the world and the game and all this stuff without being so info heavy. So that one's kind of a plus minus situation, kind of balances it out. But another problem I had with this book was just the author said, it looks like it's been a few sentences since I put 80s reference. Let's just pick one off the shelf and throw it in there. Like, he just tried to fit as many, it was like a turkey. He just tried to fit as many 80s references in that bitch as he could. And I'm just like, settle down, all right? Like, I appreciate what you're doing, but this is just, it didn't feel natural. Like, there would be lists of 80s reference. Like, I wish I would have wrote down some of it because it's just like lists. And I'm just like, can you please just like more organically put this in? Like, I understand these are things you're excited about. And like, as a beginner writer, amateur, whatever, I do want to put in references to media I love, but there's a point where it just gets too heavy-handed and it's not organic. And that's what I need. Like, sometimes it was organic, but other times I'm just like, But I will say, one thing that did interest me about this, and as I read through was, well, first of all, of course, I wanted to see what happened at the end, because I haven't seen the movie. But second of all, is just like how it was set up with the different challenges. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing like, oh, what's gate 3 going to be, or what's gate 2 going to be? Like, what challenges do they have to get through? Like, what are the riddles? I felt like that was very, very clever. Like, he had to come up with these riddles for all these clues, and I really appreciated that while incorporating these 80s references. I thought that was pretty cool, okay? And I really was interested in seeing what the next challenge would be, or what the next clue is, and try to decipher it myself. So I really like that. I also really, really liked the world it was set in. Not necessarily the real world, because that was kind of like, fucked. But the world of the Oasis, I felt like Ernest Cline put a lot of thought into this world, and just mapping it out and deciding what to put and what not to put, and just all the minute little details. And I did really appreciate that. However, because of the writing and how the dialogue between the characters and the obnoxious amount of inorganic 80s references, I couldn't give this book anything but 2 stars. So there obviously, there's a lot of recycling in the world of art and stuff. Like, they always say nothing's original. It's always like inspired by something or whatever. And, sometimes people come up with very similar concepts, and they either take it a different way, or they don't realize this other one came out and all this stuff. I don't know what the case for this is, but I have quite a few books on my shelf that are very similar to each other. In a previous video, I talked about Wilder Girls and Lord of the Flies because those two have been compared. Turns out they were not very similar at all, but they'd still been compared, so I decided to talk about them and read them around the same time. Well, I did the same thing with Ready Player One and Warcross, okay? This is a book I've had on my shelf, I've been wanting to read, and Marie Lu, like before I read Warcross, I hadn't even read a single one of her books, but I still was a Marie Lu stan. Just based on like all of the books she had written, the cool ass covers and the concepts, I was here for Marie Lu. So, being that Warcross is a pretty similar theme to Ready Player One, I decided to read them, not necessarily back to back, but very close to each other in the same month. The idea behind Warcross is that I just realized I didn't give the synopsis of Ready Player One. I am so sorry. But go look it up if you don't know what it is. But so for Warcross, first of all, look at this cover. Stunning, sickening. I am gagging, Marie Lu. Like, you ain't had to do it to us. Sis went all out. Oh, love it, love it, love it. And then whenever you take off the dust jacket, oh, look at that. Oh, absolutely stunning. Sickening. Sickening. In the best kind of way. Okay, so, the concept behind Warcross. So, it's like Ready Player One. There is this virtual reality world. I will say the world in Warcross does not seem nearly as complex as Ready Player One, because Ready Player One, you have all these planets you can travel to, they're doing business in virtual reality. There's brothels, virtual reality, and things like that. There's the dark web and then the Warcross, and it seems like Warcross is this game that they can play, which is basically like capture the flag, but instead of the flag being stationary, it's just a gem above their head and you gotta get from the other team. And there's like power-ups and stuff and avatars and levels and all that stuff. And then there's the dark world, which is basically the deep web, the dark web, and you can go there and buy like drugs and guns, and I think there was something about like brothels being there too, but that seemed to be the only real like physical space to go do stuff like that, whereas Warcross was just playing this game. Okay, and I keep saying it seems because this book had the exact opposite problem of Ready Player One. And once I read this book, I actually appreciated Ready Player One because I didn't know what the fuck was going on with Warcross. Like, I think it's just a game, but then they have the dark web that you can visit. Like, I don't know. I was very, very confused. I felt like I did not get enough info about what the hell was going on. All right, all of a sudden it's just like, boom, she's in the championship. Boom, she's in the dark web. Like, I don't know. So that kind of really frustrated me because I'd much rather have this info dump and know what the heck is going on than not really know much of what's going on, not really understand the VR world. Like, I need a set of rules and regulations so I know what's going on, because there were times where I was reading this book and I was like, oh, you can do that in the Warcross universe? Oh, you can do that in the virtual reality universe? Oh, okay. But with this one, since the world of Warcross is not as big and expansive as Ready Player One, they did not spend nearly as much time in the virtual world as they did in Ready Player One. So I still haven't given you the synopsis. Let me give it to you real quick. Okay, so it's about this girl, Emika Chen, and she's this hacker. She's really good at hacking all this stuff. And Warcross is this game that people play, and it's like a big deal. It's like a big old esports deal. And so they have this big championship. And see, I was also confused about the championship because, like, at one point it's like talking about math, like there's 16, there's 40, candidates and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sis, I haven't taken math in 5 years, okay? I am a psychology major, all right? There is a reason I am not an engineer. It's because we don't play games with math, all right? I came here to have a good time, and I'm feeling attacked with all this math. So they have like this, I guess, preliminary game. I was very confused by the setup of this tournament, but it's like this big deal and everyone's watching and everything. And Emika sees this power up and she's like, because like whenever you watch, you can like basically float around, like, you know how in Among Us, whenever you die, you're a little ghosty and the live people can't see you. That's basically what it's like whenever they're watching the game. So she floats and she's like, oh, I see this really good power up. I could steal that from this game and sell it, because she's in a real pinch for money. So she goes to do it, and she does this hack and all this stuff and accidentally gets put into the game. And one thing to note about Emika Chin that this book will not let you forget is that she has rainbow colored hair. This book will not let you forget that. I cannot count on two hands how many times that was referenced. Every time we spoke about Emika Chin's hair, she had to include that it was rainbow colored. And I don't mean to like diss Marie Lu for this, because I am definitely still going to read the sequel to this book, and I'm definitely going to read Sky Hunter and the Legend series and anything else she has out. I am 100%. This wasn't my favorite, but I'm still going to read it. So yeah, so she gets in, and then they're all like, oh my god, she hacked, oh my god. So then the man who invented this, he's all like, I need you to spy for me, because you're a bounty hunter and a hacker. I need you to spy, my man on the inside. And she's like, but I don't. And he's like, I'll give you a lot of money. And she's like, okay. So she gets on this team, and she gets involved in the Warcross universe, and she's like going through the competition and everything, and trying to like find who the person who has this big plan to like fuck shit up is. And it's just her going through that, but she also gets close to Hideo. I love a good romance. I love me a juicy ass romance. I love it like in the worst situations, shove a romance in there and you got me. But this one did not feel very organic. Just didn't. It kind of fell flat for me. And the way these characters talk, and again, the writing style, not as bad as Ready Player One, but it still felt like it was aimed at maybe like young adults or something. I know the topics were a little heavy, but it felt, again, like how they were speaking to each other didn't feel very organic, and it felt like a lower level of writing. And look, I want to be a writer, and I know whatever I publish is going to be shit at first, so I'm not trying to be on my high horse, but this is just what I felt reading this book. And I felt like the way they spoke to each other, the characters in general, not just the two love interests, was rather childish. And then you have that layer of not quite maturity mixed in with these scenes between Hideo and Emika where things got a little steamy, and it felt out of place. It felt like maybe if the writing were aimed more at adults, it could fit, but I felt like some of those sex scenes weren't. I mean, not that they were graphic, vulgar sex scenes, but just some of the stuff, some of the touching, I just didn't need. But yeah, so this one, I ended up giving it 3 stars, and I hope I thoroughly explained why. I'm still going to read the sequel of this, and like I said, everything else that Marie Lu has written. I already have Legend, and I have Sky Hunter on the list of stuff to get. So I'm still going to be doing that, but I just wasn't that big of a fan of this one. But moving on. Alright, so this book was the second 5 out of 5 book that I read, and wow. So that is Educated by Tara Westover. Alright, so the synopsis of this book is that Tara was born into a family of Mormons, or I think they were described as survivalist Mormons. So, oh my God, this book is a lot to unpack, from just the physical, the mental, the emotional abuse that this girl went through and what she went on to achieve. Oh my God, it was just wow. Okay, so Tara's born to this family of Mormonist survivalists, and she never went to school. The mom tried to homeschool them, but eventually ended up giving up. And her dad never wanted the kids to go to school because he saw it as like the government trying to brainwash you. And then the mom, there was like a whole chapter where she talked about being a midwife and all this stuff, how she became the midwife of their community, the dangers that were involved in that and all this stuff. And then her eventually becoming basically a healer, but it was like muscle testing or something like that, where basically she just like touch and be like, oh yeah, God's telling me this is what's wrong with you. Like at one point Tara got a cut and the mom touched it, she's like, yeah, God's telling me you don't have tetanus, instead of taking her to the hospital. That was another thing they didn't believe in, was hospitals. It was just a lot. And then just the gross neglect from her father and his lack of consideration for how his actions affect his family and the dangers he was putting his children and his family in just absolutely pissed me off. And it got to the point, like the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, Tara, leave. And it got to the point where she ended up cutting off her family and all this stuff. And this is just her story about how this uneducated woman was able to get into college and went on to go to the UK to study to get her graduate degree, and then I think she ended up getting her PhD. I'm pretty sure she did. But just her hard work that went into getting this, and it was just inspirational. It was amazing. Very, very frustrating at times because of the situation she was put in with her family and her inability to sever those bonds, which is completely understandable. Like, that's a hard thing to do, and it's painful, but just watching them treat her like this made me so angry at times. Like, I had to sit down and talk to my boyfriend and just vent. Of the memoirs I've read, highly would recommend this. This is up there with Michelle's memoir. It's phenomenal. 5-star read right there. All right, so the next book I read was The Tattooist of Auschwitz. So this is about a Slovakian Jew named Lale, who ends up getting put into a concentration camp and becomes the tattooist of Auschwitz. So he is in charge of tattooing all the numbers on people, and it talks about his journey through that and him meeting this woman, Gita, and just their interactions and everything. And the story itself, okay, so this is a very tough subject to read about. It's very sad, especially once Lale realized what was happening in the gas chambers and things like that. It was tough, but I could only give this book 3 out of 5 stars. And reading through some of the comments about how other people felt, I realized something. So someone pointed out that the author of this, Heather Morris, is a screenwriter. And when they said that, I realized everything makes sense now. Because this book really felt like the skeleton that would be a script, and I needed actors and actresses to bring it to life. And what I mean by that is, it was very dialogue heavy. It was very lacking of transition, because in a movie, you can just transition from one scene to the other and there's visual cues between that, like a whole ass different set of characters. With this, like with a book, you have to let the reader know, hey, we're transitioning, let's go. But with this one, I felt like there wasn't that let's go moment. And I don't know, I just really wish there would have been more describing of the feelings and things like that. It wasn't a bad book. It was a beautiful story. Like, I absolutely adore the story, but it was the writing for me that just really took it away from me. Now, if you took this and adapted it to some kind of visual media, this would probably make me cry. This would end me. Like, it would be amazing. But right now, this is just bare bones and really needs the visuals to bring it to life. And like I said, it makes sense because it reads like a screenplay, not like a normal book. And you know, that's what she is stronger at, and she took a shot writing a book, and hey, it was a decent book. It just, for me, it just was 3 out of 5. Alright, so next book. Alright, so the next book I read, I actually listened to this in audiobook, and that was Pretty Girls by Karin. Originally, I'd given this 4 stars, but then I kind of knocked it down to 5 stars. So what it's about is there are these 2 sisters, Claire and Lydia, and whenever they were younger, their big sister Julia went missing. Like, never found a body, never found any evidence, no one knew what the hell was going on. What I liked about this was the fact that you would read from the perspective of Claire and you would read from the perspective of Lydia as they try to navigate what's going on. But also you get snippets from the dad, and because he had kept journals after after Julia's disappearance. And you get to read snippets from that, and I really, really enjoyed that because it was like a flash to the past. So it's been years since she's gone missing. And I think it's been more than 20 years. So Claire and Lydia haven't spoken. Lydia's off living her life. She has a child and a boyfriend, and you know, she's getting by and everything. And then Claire was this trophy wife. Everything sets off when Claire's husband is killed in like a back alley stabbing. So it's just going through and flashing back to like them talking about what their family went through and how basically the father's obsession with finding Julia, between Everything I Never Told You and Pretty Girls, like Julia, Lydia, Julia, like, and it's very similar stories with 3 kids. I'm getting tongue-tied on the names. But Julia, so after Julia went missing, it basically tore the family apart. Like, the father became obsessed with finding her. The mother couldn't handle it anymore, divorced, and there were some other falling outs between the sisters that made Lydia want to separate from Claire and the mother. And it's just, events unfold and they start getting clues about what happened to their sister, and it's them following the trail. It gets pretty brutal sometimes. A lot of people were describing this as very, very brutal. There were some pretty brutal scenes. However, as someone who is a horror aficionado, I love horror movies, horror literature, and horror manga. I've seen some fucked up shit. So this stuff was pretty fucked up, but comparatively, I guess I've just been desensitized because of all the fucked up shit I watch, that it wasn't as gruesome to me, but I could definitely understand. And there are a few trigger warnings in it because there are some rough things that happen in this book that may not be the best for everyone. Overall, it was a 3-star. It was okay. It was good. It was good, but it wasn't very memorable to me. It's not something I'm going to think about next year or 5 years from now. It was just another thriller I read. And while I enjoyed it while I was reading it, it's not something I'm going to be thinking about very often. So that's why I could only give it 3 stars. All right, so the next book I read I finally got to Station 11, and I read Severance last May for the Asian Readathon, and I really, really enjoyed Severance. Like, that book was very, very good and had a lot of like nice base idea, or like under the surface ideas that I really, really liked. And as soon as people heard I read Severance, they're like, oh, you should read Station 11. So I bought it, and I finally was able to get to it. So let me give you the synopsis of it. So Station 11 has 2 timelines, I guess. It switches back and forth from the past to the present. And in the past, it is going through the life of Arthur, who was this like big Hollywood actor and everything, and like famous, and he had 3 different wives, and going through his life being an actor, being on the rise, and then kind of settling down some, and then his different wives and the relationships with them and all this stuff. And then the present time is 20 years later, it is in this post-apocalyptic world where there was this disease that wiped out a bunch of people, and society just basically collapsed. Very similar to Severance in concept. But with this, how it gets a little spicy is that there is a traveling symphony that they have a bunch of people who play instruments, so they have an orchestra, but then they also have actors, and they go around performing Shakespeare and things like that. So it's them going from town to town, performing that. Naturally, in a post-apocalyptic society, not everyone's the greatest, so they have some conflict regarding that. Watching how the 2 timelines end up meeting up, I really, really enjoyed. Like, once you make the connections of who is who, as far, like, I don't want to give too much away, but as soon as you realize, oh, this character is him, I definitely had a moment. I definitely really, really enjoyed this read. I only gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, however. And the reason for this is amazing writing. Like, it was phenomenal writing and everything like that. Everything felt natural, organic, the things I like. But my problem with this book stemmed from the fact that, and this is purely a personal thing. Like, I think anyone else who would read this would probably give it 5 out of 5, but this is purely personal. I was rushing through the chapters about Arthur and the past. Like, I wanted to read about this post-apocalyptic world and how they were surviving in it, and like how they turned these cities into post-apocalyptic cities like this. Like, I was more interested in what's going on post-infection rather than what's going on with Arthur in the past. Whenever the 2 started lining up more, and I could see the trajectory, I did enjoy Arthur's perspectives more. But in the beginning, where I'm like, okay, like, I don't care that he's cheating on his wife, like, whatever, I want to read about Kirsten and her traveling symphony. And like I said, that was purely a personal thing, so I feel like people would enjoy this. It was just my lack of paying attention to the present and wanting to hear about all that cool post-apocalyptic shit. So yeah, Station 11, I would highly recommend. Between Station 11 and Severance, I'd have to go with Severance. If you like Severance, you should definitely read Station 11. If you like Station 11, you should definitely read Severance. I'm gonna wrap this video up there because it's getting pretty long and I am at the halfway point of the books I read. So I'm gonna cut it off there and have a separate video for the remainder of the books I read this month. These weren't in any particular order or anything besides the Warcross and Ready Player One and the order at which I read them. So it's not like one video is going to be better than the other, although you should watch both and tell me what you think of the books because I love to talk about them. All of my socials at the bottom between Twitter and the Instagram and my Goodreads and all that stuff, so we can be friends and chit chat. I'll also put a list of the books I talked about. And yeah, so everyone have a great day, and I will see you next time.